Good afternoon, and you're very welcome. I must tell you, into my video chat room. That's not really a room, it's my terrace. And I'm delighted you've joined me, whether it be evening, morning, noon, or night. It doesn't make any difference. I'm just happy that you've joined me. Now, the story today is about the Beatles. Now, why all of a sudden the Beatles now? Well, I can tell you why. That tomorrow, Friday, let's say Friday, tomorrow, which is tomorrow, a new Beatle film documentary is about to be released, about to be premiered. It's called Beatles 64. And what it's about how these four young boys from Liverpool conquered America almost overnight. I'm dying to see it because I'm a Beatle fan. The great honour to the Beatles themselves is directed by Martin Scorsese, so that in itself is a great honour. In fact, there's honours pouring still into the Beatles 50 years on since they broke up. For example, the 67th annual Grammy Awards this year have voted the best recording of the year, Here and Now, which is only a tiny little tape, a section on a tape that John Lennon wrote before he died, but Paul got hold of it thanks to Yoko Ono, and well, you've heard the song. It's amazing now and then. Anyway, I got interested in the Beatles. I was telling you that as a kid, I went to a Beatles show. Excuse me, excuse me, when they came to Dublin. But I think it was really interesting when I used to watch. You all watch television pop shows in the days. What do they call 6-5 special? Ready, steady, go. You remember all of those? Ah, well, of course you do. We had in Dublin the Showband show, which I was honoured to play on it once with the Kingbees and the Royal Showband. Anyway, just going back a bit, I used to watch the shows, and people like Cliff Richard, Marty Wilde, you remember Joe Brown, the Vernon Girls, Frank Ifield, I Remember You. It was all happening like that, but all of a sudden came these four guys with long hair, all different clothing, different than we've ever seen before. I was totally smitten by it, totally taken by it. And I wanted to form a group, and a few young lads, we got together, and I had one drum, and we formed a group called the Keynotes at the time that turned into the Kingbees. That's another story. And that was the beginning of my affair with music and in actually playing music as well. Now, let's move forward on how I had a meeting with one of the Beatles and other associate with Beatle and stuff, which I'll share with you now. So it was around 1968. I was in London with a girl who was going to be the architect for a discotheque that I wanted to open, Ireland's first discotheque. When I said first club, I mean dance and dining club and everything. I was only 18. But I wanted to open this club. And London was booming with clubs. And I said, let's go. I said to the designer girl, let's go to London and let's have a look and see and get some ideas and be inspired. Now, I don't remember why why we were walking down Savile Row, but I noticed a crowd of young girls standing around, young girls and guys, I think, standing around, like crowding around just near the end of the street. And I thought, God, there must have been an accident or something. As nosy as I am, I went down there, and they were all standing outside a building. And I said to the girl I was with, I said, my God, that's Apple, the Beatles headquarters. Let's go in. And she said, we'd never get in. I said, come on, you've got to fake it. First of all, you've got to approach something like this with confidence. You know, they'll turn you away sometimes, but if you're walking in, you can't be shy. You've got to be, hey, hello, and you never get, come on, let's go. We walked up the steps, about 5 steps, to this big white door. I think it was a white door. And the door opened, like they obviously got a peephole or something, opened the door. And there's a big doorman there. But before he could say anything, the girl in reception said, hi, Morris. Now, I have no idea how she knew me, how she knew who I was. And her name is Debbie, and I just found her, Debbie Wellham. Debbie Wellham. And I just put a thing on my social media asking, does anyone know her? Because I've been trying to get in touch with her. I have no idea. She said, come in, come in. So we both went in. I couldn't believe it. Beautiful white reception. I think an apple green carpet. So it was magnificent. I couldn't believe it. I could smell the Beatles all around me. Don't forget, we're talking about 68. We're talking about 68. We're talking about the Beatles were the biggest things in the world. Here I am in their headquarters. There must be a Beatle here somewhere. I thought, oh, Jesus, show me around. Is there a Beatle? Let me see a Beatle. Anyway, we sat down quietly and started chatting. And she said, why are you here? And I said, we've come over, and I told her the idea for the club, etc., etc. She said, that's great. And chatting. And I said, is there a Beatle here? I'd love to see a Beatle. And she said, well, hold on. She said, Paul McCartney is coming. He'll be here shortly. And almost with that, there was screaming on the street. And she said, oh, yeah, here comes Paul. And the door opens, and in walks Paul McCartney. Now, at first, I was sort of taken back. It's Paul McCartney. But he didn't look like a Beatle. Why? Because he had his Beatle hair all greased back tight. He looked almost bald, tight. And he had a long sort of old-fashioned herringbone coat on. Must have been winter. So he came in, and Debbie said to him, say hello to Morris and the girl. And he came over very polite, and he sat between us. And we started chatting away. And I had to say, I said, Paul, what happened to your hair? Oh, he said, to be honest with you, I talked, so it's a Liverpool accent. No, he didn't talk that. He said, to be honest with you, he said that I like to walk to the office. And he said that, I'm not normally recognized when I'm like this. So it's sort of a disguise that I like to use when I'm walking. Oh, I said, fine. And we're chatting away. And I told him about the club, and he came up with some ideas for the club that were out of reach. But as we were talking, I noticed he had an elastic band on his wrist. It's odd. We didn't think, if someone worked in an office, they'd keep an elastic band. But why was one of the most famous songwriters in the world and musicians? Has he got an elastic band? And as nosy as I am, second nosy of the day, I had to say, Paul, do you mind me asking, why are you wearing an elastic band on your wrist? Is there a reason? He said, there is a reason. He said, an elastic band can remind you of many things. For example, if you smoke and you've given up smoking, and then you have the desire to have another cigarette, snap it against your wrist. Really? If you've got to remember to do something that day and you're distracted about something, snap it on your wrist, and you think, why have I done that? So he told me this. Anyway, I'm sure it's to do with drinking as well, snap it on your wrist. And I actually looked that up, and it's a fact that people do that. They wear an elastic band. In fact, I tried it, and I've achieved an amazing thing, an awful pain on my bloody wrist when I snapped it. But anyway, so we were chatting away, and I couldn't believe I'm sitting with Paul McCartney. Now, I'm not sure. I should really check the dates when I was actually there, because I think it was either the day before they went up on the roof to one of the world's most iconic concerts of all time. I'm not sure, but I will check the dates. And did you remember Get Back on the roof of Apple? But it wasn't a great experience to be sitting there with Paul McCartney. And I said he said, I have to go. And he went inside the sort of doors, and he goes inside. I'm still in shock, as he walks away from me. Paul McCartney, the Beatle. And I said, I'm going. And Debbie said, where are you off to? And she said, I said, I'm going to, we have to go down to see someone. I can't remember where. We were definitely going to meet someone or go somewhere, or just try not to be so, rude and hang around, just to go, to appreciate that moment. And the funny thing, I didn't get an autograph. There was no such thing as mobile phones, so there was no photographs. God, when I think about it, there was no photographs of Paul McCartney. Anyway, so that was that bit. So I said, we're going. She said, no, hang on. She said, John is due in. Do you want to hang on till he comes in? And I said, oh, do I? Of course I do. So as we were sitting there, the door opened. There's no screams this time, and a guy walked in, very recognizable, extremely recognizable. He looked famous and youngish, but very recognizable. And he went over to the desk and he said to Debbie, I'm here to see, what's his name? Peter Asher. Peter Asher was Jane Asher's brother. I don't know if you remember, but he is now a director in Apple. He's a very, very clever guy. He's formed a band called Peter and Gordon. Please lock me away. Paul wrote that for them and went to number one. Paul wrote for Mary Hopkins. Those Were the Days went to number one. He wrote a song for the Rolling Stones. I can't remember what it was. Went to number one. So it wasn't just the Beatles that Paul had huge successes with. Anyway, so this guy said, it was Peter Asher, and she said, one moment. She said, what's your name? And he said, Paul Anka. At that stage, Paul Anka, an American, of course, had so many hits, from Diana to Put Your Head on My Shoulder to She's a Lady. And, of course, his biggest song that he'd written, co-written, it was My Way for Frank Sinatra. And here's Debbie saying to him, what's your name? Anyway, she ushered him through to see Peter. Our secretary came down and got him to bring him up to see Peter Asher. I don't know what the meeting was about. I don't know whether he signed for Apple, I'm not sure. But very shortly after that, the door screams, door swung open. I swear to you, John Lennon walked in and he looked like a bagman. He had this fur maggoty coat on, a pair of runners, or whatever you call them, gym shoes. They looked filthy. And dragging Yoko behind him, and she was dragging Kyoko. I think that's the daughter's name, who was probably, she looked about 6 years old. And Debbie said to John, John, say hello to Morris. And he goes, and he walks through. So we never had the same reaction from John as we did from Paul. But I didn't care. Oh, I wish, when I think today, I had these photographs. There is another story, by the way. Let me just skip quickly. Just as we were going to leave, Debbie said, do you want me to get a photograph signed or something for you? And she said, I said, yeah, if we could get an album signed, that would be great. But she said, give me your address and I'll have it done for you. Don't worry, I can't disturb them now, but I'll have it done for you. And I gave her my address in Dublin. I wasn't living in Spain at the time. And that was it, I sort of forgot. I thought a photograph or something. But I tell you what did arrive from that, what she got from me. She sent me an album. It was a very odd album. It was an album of John Lennon on the front cover, with Yoko Ono in a hospital bed and John Lennon on the floor. Now, people are big Beatle fans and probably remember this album. And on the album, there is a track of the baby's heartbeat until it fades away. Something like that it was. And signed by John Lennon. Now, maybe Yoko, but I think it was John Lennon. So I couldn't believe I had this, but I thought nothing of it. But when I got married and moved out of the house, my mother's house, the album ended up in the bin. And I think that album today would be worth multis of thousands, which would come in very handy. Anyway, we were going, and I said, we're going. And she said, where are you going? I said, we're going to meet someone. She said, well, look, hold on a minute. And Mal Evans walked in. Well, I immediately recognized Mal Evans. Mal Evans is the Beatles' road manager, and he's the sort of the assistant to the Beatles. He's been with them from Liverpool all the time, and I've seen him in photographs and everything. So I recognize him. And she said, Mal, are you going to go and park the car? And he said, yes. And she said to him, will you give Morris and give them a lift? Will you give them a lift? He said, certainly. He said, I'm going down to Piccadilly. That's where we parked the car. I don't care where I was going, but was I going to get into John Lennon's iconic Rolls Royce that's been photographed billions of times? In fact, John ended up getting that Rolls Royce painted in gypsy colours, like a caravan. Beautifully done. And I believe it's in a museum in Germany. But maybe it goes on tour around the world, that car. And extraordinary. It's like a Pullman Rolls Royce, a very large Rolls Royce. And you've seen it. You've seen photographs of it. And that car today is worth multis of millions as well. It's not for sale. Anyway, so we went outside, and the screaming girls and everything, they weren't screaming at me, but they were all standing around the apple cores. But they said, hi, Mal. They were all saying, they know everything. So anyway, we got into the back of the car. And the first thing I noticed, it had a television in it, small television. And I said to Mal, you got TV? And he said, yeah, John was going down to southern France to make a movie, How I Won the War. I think that was the name of the movie he was in. And so we've had that put in and some entertainment things that we can get on, etc. There was a record player in the car as well. When you remember the car record players before the 8-track, you mustn't remember them, do you? It was that. It was all sort of equipment, and the back of the car was like a white sofa practically. It was just beautiful, and the windows were all blackened, the passenger windows. So we had this wonderful drive down Savile Row, or up Savile Row, down to Piccadilly, where Mal parked John Lennon's Rolls Royce, and it was a great. I couldn't believe it. Paul McCartney sitting around, showing me his elastic band, in John Lennon's Rolls Royce going down to Piccadilly. What an experience, what a memory. And at that time, of course, I said the Beatles were the biggest thing. As we passed people on the street, they all waved at the Rolls Royce. So I put down the window a bit and put my hand out waving. So I think people thought it was Lennon, because you couldn't see into the back of the car. But people in London knew that was Lennon's Rolls Royce. I don't think there was many that looked like that. Anyway, so that was my experience of the afternoon or the morning I spent with the Beatles. But there was other associated things with Beatles that I could share with you. For example, when I came to live here, I got on radio down here, was Onda Cero. And one of the great thrills, because I'm, as I say, a huge Beatle fan, was an arrangement I'd made to interview George Martin. Now, as you know, George Martin was the Beatles' producer. He was known as the fifth Beatle. There was a proviso that we had to adhere to, is that it had to be a recording. Now, I like doing my interviews live, but this had to be a recording. And the reason is, he told me, is he said, I'm slightly deaf. And I don't want to be saying what, and then you have to repeat. And you can edit those bits out if I need to. I couldn't edit them out, but the producer on Onda Cero, he could sort of fix them up or whatever. Anyway, so the interview went ahead. And what I noticed in the interview, if you look at any of the Beatles, listen to any of the Beatles songs, George Martin, the big ones, the huge ones, George Martin had great influence, like orchestrations in it was Yesterday and all of that. He wrote all the parts, the violins, all of that. He wrote. Do you remember All You Need Is Love? That was an extraordinary song by the Beatles because they only had like a week to write it. And it went around as the biggest audience in the world. You remember? It was satellite, over 1 billion people. Well, George produced that, and he got all the all the brass on it and everything. You know, he worked closely with Paul, not with John, didn't give a damn, but he worked closely with Paul. But what I got out of this interview with George Martin is that he was paid pittance, compared as a producer, compared to the Beatles. Now, I didn't expect him to be, but I expected him to become a multi-millionaire as their producer, and percentages, producers get on records, but his percentage was tiny. And I did feel that in the interview with George Martin. He did feel embittered slightly, because I did challenge him. I said, listen, do you not feel that you should have got more credits for what you actually did on the Beatle records? And he's more or less said yes. I mean, you take Billy Preston, who played on Get Back and all these extraordinary songs. He was paid a session musician fee, probably £100 a session. Extraordinary, but those were the days. He was probably very happy that he played on it as well. Also, Cynthia Lennon, as you know, I am very lucky to bring her down here to come on my TV show. And my TV show opened with a clip of the Beatles in the cavern, the Beatles in America. So just a clip. And I remember Cynthia Lennon saying to me, "Are you a rich man?" I said, "I'm certainly not." She said, "But you'd need to be." What? She says, "If Yoko Ono knew you used that footage, she'd probably sue you for thousands." Oh, I said, "Don't tell her then." Anyway, Cynthia, in her interview, also explained how she found out about Yoko Ono and how mean John was to her, because she went to Greece, I believe, with a friend. John suggested, and when she came back from Greece, she went on, is it called Tittlehurst Park or something like that? They're a beautiful parkland mansion. And she arrived back after a 2 weeks holiday with her friend in Greece. And sitting on the terrace in her dressing gown was Yoko Ono and John having breakfast. And Yoko sort of looked at her like she was a no one. And so I said, yeah, hi. Now, Cynthia knew who that was because Yoko used to stand at the gate of Tittlehurst Park with all the fans waiting for John's rolls to come up and go back. Very cruel. You know, John didn't try to hide the situation that it was a girl staying in her bed type of thing. And I found that with her. Also moving on to another associated Beatle was Paul McCartney's brother, Mike. Well, he called himself Mike McGear. Do you remember when he was in the band called Scaffold? Lily the Pink, the Pink, the Pink. And I flew him over as a guest on my TV show. He had quite a huge ego. He called Paul our kid, and he kept saying to me, our kids, if it wasn't for our kid, the Beatles would be no one. Well, to be honest with you, if it wasn't for their kids, the Beatles would be no one. So, but he was, well, okay, he's very proud of his brother. But we're in the dressing room getting ready. You know, they do makeup and what have you. And he said to me, Maurice, don't talk to me about the Beatles. And I thought, oh my God, I've got Paul McCartney's brother here. And he doesn't want to talk about the Beatles. He said, you know, Lily the Pink was the biggest record of the year, and talk about Scaffold. Oh, God. Anyway, we went on the set. From the minute he arrived on... Oh, the ear fell off. The minute he arrived on the set, all he could talk about was the Beatles. And afterwards, we went for some lunch. The studios were in Malaga, Fungirola, somewhere there. We went for some lunch. And we went into a bar, I swear. And there was a Beatles song playing. And the minute he heard it, he went straight over to the barman. He said, that's my brother. And the barman sort of looked at him weird and looked at me and, yeah, okay. And so I sat down. Anyway, Paul, right now, as I'm speaking right now, and Ringo are both touring America. And you'll see a little bit on my social media, my Facebook, of Paul's motorcade. I thought it was Donald Trump when I saw the video. You see these big black cars with flashing lights on the grille in the front and outriders with them. Maybe 4 of these huge black cars, you know, the type that Donald Trump's in, bulletproof or whatever. I'm not sure if it's beautiful, arriving at the stadium. But what gets me, the screams on the street, hundreds, if not thousands, screaming youngsters. Paul is 82, and I'm sure their parents weren't born when the Beatles, well, I'm sure maybe their grandparents were born just when the Beatles were breaking up. It is extraordinary when you think about it. Ringo's 84 and got amazing energy, jumping around the stage. And he's touring, not with Paul. Paul's doing stadium tours. 100,000, 80,000 people. Ringo's doing theatre tours, but there they get 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people. 82 years old and 84 years old. You know, I'm so looking forward to seeing Beatles 64, the new documentary. I really enjoyed it. And if any of you are Beatle fans, if you're not Beatle fans, you probably won't be listening to this. But Beatle fans out there, if you want to watch something quite amazing, watch a documentary. It's in 2 parts. It's called Get Back. It's an extraordinary documentary. It's filmed over a period of 4 weeks. It shows a calendar. And I swear to you, when you watch this, you think it was filmed yesterday. The clarity of the filming. You know, it was like yesterday, the colour, everything is perfect. What struck was the whole thing, a lot of things struck me about this documentary, and I watched it maybe 3 times, is how close Paul and John were and how George was not given a fair go. He was allowed 1 record. It turns out that George, I remember Frank Sinatra said about something, you know, George's song. I remember him saying, greatest love song ever written. I thought George wrote the most beautiful songs, the most amazing songs, and pop songs as well, like Taxman. My Guitar Gently Weeps. But he didn't have a chance really with the Beatles. Paul and John wanted, so they had this agreement, so all the money was pouring in royalties to them. It was a bit unfair. And George talks about after the Beatles broke up and everything. But I did notice in the studio how close Paul and John were. And I noticed that Paul was the director, Paul was the writer, Paul was in charge. Ringo mentioned something. He said you could be out in the whatever the gardens of his home or with John in his home, and the phone goes, and they'll both say, "Oh my God, Paul's on the phone. He wants us in the studios." They wrote some amazing songs in that album, all in 4 weeks, like The Long and Winding Road, Let It Be, Get Back, some extraordinary songs. Even Ringo wrote a song called Octopus's Garden, I think, on that track. And I liked at the sort of the end of it, they'd agreed with the record company that they would appear live, but to promote the album Get Back. We filmed on Abbey Road, and someone said, well, they wanted to do Hyde Park, and George says, "No way, I'm playing Hyde Park. Forget it." And then another Beatle said, they want us on a cruise ship, and Ringo said, "No way, I'm playing on a cruise ship." I don't know who it was that said, and you can see it in the documentary, "Let's just go to the bloody roof and we'll film Get Back there." And they did in the end. And it was one of the most iconic live concerts ever filmed in the world today. That just 5-minute clip, whatever, the 6 minutes, Get Back. And there's a lot of documentary about making of that. But honestly, the Beatles are still riding high. Still riding high. Isn't it amazing when you think of it? 50 years after they broke up. Anyway, that's it. There's really not much more to tell you about my either association with the Beatles and meeting the Beatles. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm delighted you joined me. I might just go now and play some Beatle music, and I look forward to seeing you the next time. I have no idea. Well, I am going to do part 2 of embarrassing moments. And there's another thing that I'm quite interested in doing. There are 3 people on this Costa. One is a bare knuckle fighter. She's a champion. One is a model, and these are all youngsters under 20, I think, or 21, is a model, and she's taking Paris by storm. And the other one is a singer who appeared on Britain's Got Talent, or was it America's Got Talent, when she was like 13 and blew the judges away. She's now 18 or 19 and still an amazing singer. And I thought, the Costa has these 3 people, and maybe there's more, but there are 3 famous people living on the Costa, and I'd like to sort of arrange maybe an interview with each one of them and put them on as one go. Anyway, we'll see what comes up next, but I really enjoy doing this, and I enjoy your comments. Thanks for joining me.